Attachment, where I will be covering everything true crime. I'm going to try and put a little bit of a different spin on it. I hope you enjoy my new channel. In my first video here, we are going to look at the Chris Coleman case. So let's go ahead and get started. Chris Coleman and his wife had been married for 12 years, and they met when they were both in the military, training at the K-9 unit. Sherry became a stay-at-home mom. They had 2 sons together, Garrett and Gavin, who were 11 and 9 respectively, and they lived in Columbia, Illinois. Chris Coleman, 32, the son of a preacher, used his Marine and security experience to land a job for a well-known televangelist, Joyce Meyer. Joyce Meyer is now known throughout the country and known throughout the world as the leading voice in the evangelical movement. St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter Nick Pister explained, "She's extremely successful financially. I've seen figures from $50 million to $100 million a year. I'm in the wrong business." Pister has followed the Coleman case for 2 years and is a CBS News consultant. Joyce Meyer does conferences all throughout the world in countries that have and that don't necessarily respond well to women who are preaching a Christian message, and so she wanted some deeper security. But being Joyce Meyer's head of security, apparently put a target on Chris Coleman's back. In November of 2008, Chris had begun receiving death threats to his work email account. Whenever Chris Coleman reported the first death threat that he got from his email account at work, at Joyce Meyer's ministry, he came to us at the police department, said Detective Barlow. The email read, "Tell Joyce to stop preaching the bullshit. If I can't get to Joyce, then I will get to someone close to her. We give the Coleman family extra patrol, which we just patrol the area a lot more than we normally would during a shift and give it special attention to make sure nobody's there," Barlow explained. It was in January of 2009 that a hand-delivered threat showed up in the mailbox at the Coleman family home, and it read, "F you, deny your God publicly or else. No more opportunities. Time is running out for you and your family." Did it concern you as a neighbor living so closely when you heard that there were death threats being made to the guy who lived across the street, Mather asked Barlow. And Barlow replied, "Absolutely." Each note seemed to escalate the seriousness of the situation. And on April 27th, 2009, less than a week before the murders, a final missive arrived with an ultimatum. "Stop today or else. I know your schedule. You can't hide from me forever. I'm always watching. I know when you leave in the morning, and I know when you stay home. You decided to ramp things up yourself." Mayer noted to Barlow, "And what did you do at your house?" Barlow said that he got a camera mounted up in his 5-year-old's bedroom and pointed it right at the mailbox, with the camera aimed directly at the Coleman's mailbox, about 214 feet away approximately. According to Barlow, they hoped to get a clear shot of whoever was leaving the notes. I did try to find the CCTV footage. I have seen it, but I unfortunately wasn't able to. The note continued to say, "And be prepared for something that was going to happen and be as provocative about it as we could," said Barlow. Instead, days later, the killer somehow snuck into the Coleman home and strangled Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin. But if the murders were linked to the threats and Joyce Meyer Ministries, that meant the cops might now be on a global search for suspects. There was a lot of fear that there was somebody out there killing families, and who was going to be next, said Major Connor. On May 4th, 2009, 4 days ago. The next morning, Vanessa Regick's son, Brendan, will turn 9, the same age as Garrett's little brother, Gavin. And the boys wanted a sleepover as a birthday ritual. Absolutely, Regick replied. You don't even have to ask. You run home and tell your mom and dad to pack your clothes and book bags for school tomorrow. Garrett tears home. They live 4 houses away. On the cul-de-sac, 5 minutes later, he's back, his shoulders slumped. My dad said tonight will not be a good night. We have to be home by 8:30. Any of you who know this case, I don't have to tell you why. And if you don't, why will become clear here in a minute. What, Regis asks? Surprised, but keeping her playful voice. I should go tell your mom and dad. Come on, let them stay. Yeah, go tell them, Garrett explains. Brightening, but Regick promises the following Saturday instead. At 8:30 p.m., she sends the boys home. This would be the last time that she would see them. It was revealed that it was revealed around this time that Chris had been having an affair with a friend of his wife, Sherry's. Her name was Tara Lentz, and she was an old college roommate of Sherry. Tara told cops that they had started their relationship in November of 2008, the same month the emails started coming in, and that Chris had told her he would present divorce papers to Sherry that same day. She ended up getting murdered. In fact, the couple had even decided the date of their future marriage, which was January of 2010, and the name they would give their future child, among other things. The cherry on top was Chris's classy move of texting his lover during his wife and kid's funeral. Yes, he texted her during their funeral, telling her how much he missed her. Friends of Sherry would later say that she told them Chris had been talking about divorce, but was afraid that it would cost him his high-paying job with Joyce Meyer. They also claimed that Sherry had said if something happened to her, to look at Chris as the responsible one, and that he had accused her and the kids of ruining his career. There was at least one testimony of potential abuse, even though the Colemans had gone through counseling set up by Joyce and seemed to be getting along better.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're sad to announce that there's been we're investigating a triple homicide here in the city of Columbia. Deceased at the home at 2854 Robert Drive is a female by the name of Sherry Coleman. She's 31 years old, and her 2 children, Garrett Coleman, who's 11 years old, and Gavin Coleman, who is 9 years old. The Columbia Police Department was called to this house this morning just before 7 a.m. and they then discovered these bodies, and shortly after that, Chief Edwards felt it his responsibility to give this investigation the most he could, so he activated and authorized the use of the Major Case Squad. Since that time, we've gathered together with investigators, and we have around 25 investigators working this crime. The Illinois State Police is involved. They're continuing their efforts at the scene, and we have investigators currently working this homicide. The autopsies are being conducted as we speak, so we don't know.
Now, I want to say something about this divorce. The real reason Chris did not want to divorce her was because if he did, his infidelity would almost certainly get out and he would lose his job. In a few minutes, I will play a portion of a deposition where Joyce Meyer herself does confirm that. On May 5th, 2009, Chris left for the gym at approximately 5:45 in the morning, and at 6:34 a.m. on May 5th, 2009, Chris Coleman called a neighbor, who was a police officer, asking him to check on his wife Sherry and his 2 sons. Chris told him he'd left an hour ago to go to the gym and had been calling Sherry to wake her up, but no one was answering. By the time Sergeant Barlow arrived to the Coleman house in Columbia, Illinois, other policemen had arrived as well, and they encountered a horrific scene. Sherry and the boys were all dead in their beds. The cause of death was determined to be ligature strangulation. Messages were sprayed and painted in red all over the house, including on Gavin's bed, which read things like "punished," "I am always watching," and "fuck you." Chris arrived shortly after the police entered the house. When he was told his family hadn't made it, he started sobbing, but didn't ask how they died. He followed cops to the police station to give a statement and was fully cooperative. He claimed that Sherry had been alive when he left for the gym, which meant that the killer had to have been waiting for him to leave the house to go in and strangle the Colemans, which doesn't make a lot of sense. According to these emails, this killer was after all of them. I don't know, maybe his thinking was that, it would be too difficult to do with Chris there. As you guys can probably guess, cops were instantly suspicious of Chris Coleman. They noticed red marks on his arms, which he claimed he didn't know how he'd get. Those marks were remnants of red spray paint. They also, when they searched his house, found the receipts for the red spray paint, and if I'm not mistaken, they also found remnants of red spray paint on his clothing. The officers who saw the bodies believed they were too cold and rigid to have died in the past hour. Chris's story was full of strange details too. For example, he said he started calling his wife right after driving out of the house that morning. Why not just wake her up before he leaves the house? He called his neighbor when he was only 5 minutes away from the house. He didn't actually call him from the gym, which suggested to the cops that he wanted them to find the bodies before he did, to strengthen his alibi. Could it be that he'd been writing those threatening emails himself in an elaborate setup to get rid of his family? Let's find out. Other evidence started piling up against Chris, although initially he denied it.
Obviously, we got an investigation to do, so I got to go over your mind, all right? It's just because we're talking to you, we're talking to a lot. Okay.
I've done it for myself.
I'll tell you what, from the beginning, let's just start off from when you got up this morning until the time you pulled up at the house. Just kind of walk me through that first,
Okay.
and then we'll go through and kind of explain, talk about some different things as far as the emails you've been getting, okay?
Well, I set my alarm clock for 5:30, and I used my phone for my alarm clock. And got up at 5:30, went in the bathroom, put these clothes here I got on, and went to the bathroom, and basically got in the truck and left. And drove off. I got to, I don't know where I was at, but called Sherry to wake her up, get her going, and she didn't answer, of course. And so I went on to the gym, to Gold's Gym, over by Ronnie's Plaza in South County. And Started working out. I text her at some point. I might even have called her again. I don't remember. I could probably look at my phone if you want me to.
Do you guys have a home phone number too, or just cell phones?
We just use cell phones. So I text her, and then she still didn't respond, and probably now it had to have been well after 6 o'clock sometime when I texted her or called her. I'm sure it's still on her phone what time it was.
Okay.
And she didn't respond. That's not like her because the kids should have been up and stuff, or getting up and going by then, I believe. And so I called her again. Called her again on the way back, or when I was getting ready to leave, and she didn't respond again. And I started getting a little concerned because it's not like her not to answer the phone. Sometimes she won't answer if she's in the shower, but she always calls me back right away. And so she didn't do that at all. And so that's when I called you.
And so what time did you text her back? The second time?
I can tell you.
6:23. So at 6:23 a.m. is when you first texted her this morning. It says, "Hey, baby, are you awake?" That sound right?
Had you tried to call before that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can pull up the call log too if you want me to.
Okay, that just does text. I'm sorry. All right, so you're just looking at text, and how are those out, Justin? Did you look at
So the first one is from you. It says, "Hey, baby, are you
6:23. I'm sorry.
6:23 a.m. And then and she doesn't respond to you, correct?
It would be on there.
Oh, right. Okay. And so the second one for you says, "I know he was tired last night." 6:23 says, "I have about 5 minutes left on cardio, then I'll be home." And she never responded to any of them because I could tell. Yeah, I could tell on the phone.
Okay.
And then at 7:27 it says, "Hello, you up?"
7:27.
I'm sorry, 6:27. 6:27. And then at the same time at 6:27, another one goes out and says, "Time to get the kids up." Anything as far as that sticks out in your mind from this morning when you left? Did you notice anything?
No, the only thing I told somebody was the only thing I can remember is having to slow down for a car backing out of the driveway. That's it.
From the which driveway were they backing out of?
I don't know. He asked me the same thing. It was like 3 or 4 up. I don't know. On the left-hand side. That's the only thing I remember.
You notice anything about the car?
It was just a darker color. The only thing I'm sorry. I should have been more observant.
I mean, anything that sticks out? I mean, were you able to tell him like what kind of car it was? I mean, did you recognize it in the neighborhood at all? Or?
No, it was just backing out of the driveway. I didn't even see it come out of the garage or anything. I just pulled out.
We've got when you left the house this morning, was your wife alive?
Oh yeah.
What would you say if I told you that I don't think she was?
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think she was. I mean, she was.
Okay.
She was laying right beside me.
Right. And I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that you were there, and I'm not doubting that you care. But I am doubting that she was alive when you left this morning. Physically, what we have are different ways to tell how long a person's been deceased. That was done. And what do you think that showed?
I don't know. I guess the time frame when I was gone. I mean,
No, you guys wrong. Chris, we need to get this resolved, okay? That you can't argue with physical evidence.
I'm not trying to argue with it.
All right. What I'm telling you is there is no other explanation. There's no other reason that the information we have would support what you're telling us. That it can't. It can't. You've told us a story and we've gone over it numerous times. Right. You know what? We walk out to Justin, maybe we missed this. Let's go in and talk to him about this and just make sure that we're not missing something. Let's give him every opportunity to tell us exactly what happened and maybe we're missing something. Right. So that's why we go out and we come back in and we go out and we come back in. Right. I did have to use the restroom, that was legitimate, but we go out and we come back in. And we felt very comfortable that we were giving you every opportunity to tell us something that was going to contradict the information that we had. Mm-hmm. All right, we've got this information, you're saying it, and we're giving you opportunity to give us something contrary to what you told us before, so that, okay, yeah, all right, that would make sense. That hasn't happened.
I'm just telling you what
hasn't
happened.
happened. Listen, man, she wasn't alive when you left.
She was alive.
She
She was laying right beside
Listen
me.
to me. We can go back and forth with this all day long, but the physical evidence doesn't lie, man. She was not alive when you left this morning. The children weren't alive when you left this morning.
Yes, they were.
No, come on, Chris.
They
We gotta get over this. Now, there's reasons, and that's the point we're at. I want to hear the reasons. Now is when we need to find out what happened, man. It's so important. You're at a great point to be able to help us to try to figure this out. We already know what happened. We need to know why it happened.
I know
All right,
what to
listen.
tell you.
Listen, no, you do know what to tell us.
No, I don't.
Come on, Chris. She was not alive when you left. The children were not alive when you left. You know that's true, and I know that's true.
No, it just...
We need to clear this up now. We need to clear it up now. Did something happen? What happened?
Nothing happened.
What was going on in your life, Chris? Because I can't buy what you're saying. The physical evidence does not lie, Chris. It does not. She was not alive when you left, period. The physical evidence does not lie, man.
What do you want me to tell you?
The
I
truth,
don't.
the
No, I'm
truth.
telling you the truth.
How did we get to this point? That's what I need to know. I need to know how and why we got to the point we're at right now. We both know you're not telling me the truth. We both know that. I've done this a long time. I'm looking into your eyes, and I can tell you you're not being truthful, Chris. We need an answer. We need our answers. As bad as this sounds, as bad as this looks, or you may think it looks, we understand, and I've talked to many people who have given me reasons, and it's like, you know what? Okay, all right, I can understand how somebody might have been feeling that at that time. And maybe they acted on it and they shouldn't have, and they regret it. There's no way to turn clocks back. You can't turn clocks back. You understand that, don't you?
Right.
You can't turn the clock back. The only thing we can do is go forward from this point, and we need to know what and why it happened. Come on, Chris, help me out with this.
I'm telling you, I've already told you. I've told everybody. I told the guy in the ambulance. I told you. I told him.
The more we go back like this, the more it makes me think that there maybe even isn't a good explanation for it. I mean, we need to know what happened. We can't keep going on this. It didn't, she was alive when I left. We know that's not true, and there's nothing we can do about changing that. If we know she wasn't alive when you left this morning, there's got to be an explanation. Now is the time to tell us. Now is the time to get this out in the open.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Yes, you do. Yes,
No.
you do. You have to tell me the truth, Chris.
I'm telling you the truth.
Were you involved in her death?
No,
Okay. Was someone you know involved in her death?
I don't know.
Did you know? Did you talk to anybody about arranging her death?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. You're
Those, kind of going back to when you first came here back in November last year, you were getting some of those emails sent to your work email address, right? Do you still have those on your computer?
I could look.
Okay.
They might be on the server. Even.
Okay. That'd
I
be
doubt
helpful.
if they're on the computer because it deletes them after so long.
Kind of purges them out type of
But
thing.
I would think they'd be on the server.
And how many threats like that? I mean, up until November, have you ever gotten threats like that before?
No, people have been upset with me, but I haven't gotten anything. I mean, I've had people yell at me and cuss at me and everything else, but,
Then
and
what-
escort them off the property and all that stuff, If I just been there this morning, I'd leave.
What we're gonna do, Chris, we're gonna get past that, okay? We're gonna work this out and get through it, all right? But what we need, the best thing you can do for us is help us. Kind of feel like you're doing a great job, man. But the best thing we can do is work together and try to figure all this out, okay? All right? And you're doing that. I mean, I'm not.
Were you able to see anything when you were in the kitchen area?
Yes, I'm right.
And would you describe what you're telling
Just
me?
all I saw was red writing.
What would the source have been of the substance?
I don't know.
I mean, did you think it was paint? Did you think it
I would
was?
assume it's probably paint.
All right.
I don't know.
Could you see what it said, or what it's? I mean,
I didn't read it.
All right,
It
we've
was,
got-
it was just such a blur. I didn't know.
Do you have any paint at your house?
I think so.
No, don't.
I don't think so.
Any spray paint?
I I do. It's old. We kind of talked about the divorce a little bit.
This last December?
Yeah. And I went to Joyce with it, told her about it, or Danny, I can't remember which one. And they knew about it, and they suggested that we meet with somebody and see if we could work out whatever it was. And really all it was just communication, not communicating very well. And so,
Did you meet with somebody?
yeah, Mike Shepard, the guy that's here downstairs in the lobby.
Okay.
He's and we've been meeting with him pretty regularly, and things have been going pretty awesome.
How often do you meet with them? I mean, you said regularly.
He travels overseas a lot too, and so as often as me and him schedule, I'd say on average maybe once a week.
Investigators were able to confirm that the account destroychris@gmail.com, which had been used to send the emails, had been created on Chris's laptop. Another telling sign to them that he was the author of his tendency to misspell the word opportunities as opportunities, which also appeared in the letters. Chris Coleman was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder on May of 2009.
Thank you for coming tonight. As stated, we have some breaking news. We have made an arrest in the homicide of Sherry, Gavin, and Garrett Coleman. We have a Christopher Coleman in custody. He was charged late this evening with 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of his wife and his 2 small children. I'd just first like to say that thanks go out to these men and women. This is just a small piece of this investigation. This breaking news, we got some information tonight that secured the warrant, and we started making phone calls, and we had 20 officers here within 45 minutes. They showed their dedication towards this investigation, and we've done all we could to solve this as quickly as we could, but also as efficiently as we could. We feel very comfortable on these charges, and we want to make the announcement. Mr. Coleman will be brought here for processing, and he will be then transferred to the Monroe County Jail later on this evening.
Where's he currently?
He may be here right now. I'm not really for sure. He's in transit. I'm sorry?
Is he turning himself in?
No, we went to his parents' home and placed him in custody there.
What changed between last week and this week?
I've been talking about how we were waiting on some forensic evidence, forensic testimony, different things, and it just all started coming together. And for several days now, we've been close. And it's just tonight there was some more evidence that came forward, and we were able to solidify just a more solid case. The prosecutor felt, as we did, that at this point there was enough time to charge him with these crimes, and it was brought before the judge late this evening. And the judge, after reviewing the evidence that we presented to them, agreed and issued this warrant for the 3 counts of murder.
Many times the charges in the warrant specify what the cause of death was.
They were murdered by forms of ligature strangulation,
Which means it wasn't the hands, it was some type of cable or wire or something.
Yes.
Can you speak to motive at this point?
Once again, we have a long road ahead of us. Columbia Police Department will be handling this case for years to come, and we don't want to do anything now to jeopardize this case down the road. So we're still going to be very careful with what we're doing with the case.
The information from tonight, though, is that from the state lab or some new evidence that you just brought to the state attorney?
There was just some evidence that was gathered that along with everything else that we've gathered, was enough for the state's attorney to start the charge.
Have you guys had the opportunity to speak to Sherry Coleman's family and give them the news?
I've made a phone call just a short time ago to let the message before.
Was there any reaction to the family or not? Because there's a bond that's
Bond has been set at no bond. We will see a judge on
Do you know what time?
No, I don't. I would like to turn it over to Chief Joe Edwards, and he has some comments to make.
Again, number one, we want to extend our thanks to the maker case father. You can see, it was basically past 10 o'clock at night, and sort of like maybe last night or something. And this evening when things sort of break, and we made the phone call back to the maker case father to get them reactivated. They were there at almost chose. We've been quite fortunate to have such an outstanding group of investigators with us over the last almost 2 weeks. And it was because of their hard work, their dedication, Their will to simply not walk away from this case before solving it is what brought us to this point. Please call us.
Do you have other suspects?
You had somebody you said was a suspect last week, and then you had so many days before you had this arrest. How difficult have these days been as you believe Christopher Coleman was your suspect, but you couldn't get him yet?
Well, when the major case squad disbanded last Friday, it was somewhat of a lonely feeling when all those investigators walked out the door. We knew that there was a road we needed to go down. We knew there was a goal that we needed to reach. We knew there was a certain level that we needed to reach before an arrest could be made. However, when a crime such as this occurs, you want to solve it as quickly as possible. Again, with a major case squad, worked for roughly 2 weeks on this case, and then when they leave, the men and women of the Colman Police Department, it's kind of a lonely feeling for a little bit. But even though the major case squad had disbanded, a number of those investigators came back. And I want to thank those police chiefs around the area who allowed them to continue working with us. We had several from the Illinois State Police, we had several from the Grand City Police Department, and these folks, even though the case had been, the squad had disbanded, they stuck around and continued to provide us with assistance. And I'm very appreciative of those agents.
I know you folks can't speak for the prosecutors, but have they indicated what kind of punishment they will seek in this case?
We have not talked about anything.
Sir, do you think the death penalty is appropriate?
Well, that's going to be up for the prosecutor to decide. There's some information that's going to be considered. And, for me to stand up here and say what's right or wrong, that would be inappropriate.
Did you still have him under surveillance even though you had disbanded and you guys had publicly pulled off the surveillance of Mr. Coleman? Did you still have someone watching him?
Well, I don't want to provide you with information on what we have been doing for the last few days, but we were pretty confident we knew his whereabouts.
Did Mr. Coleman offer any resistance when he was arrested this evening?
None to my knowledge.
Where was he arrested?
At his parents' house in Chester, Illinois.
Is he here now? Do you know for sure?
I don't know if they pulled up with him yet.
What exact time around was the arrest? Was it 8, 9?
Just around the same time the warrant was issued.
Are you looking for any other suspects in connection with this case or anyone who helped him?
Well, I'll tell you, we are always looking for additional information that we need to follow up on. I would not say we are not looking at anybody else, having involvement in that. Our case remains open. If additional information pops up that we need to go out and investigate, we can certainly do that.
Thank you very much.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming so late.
At trial, several witnesses testified to the state of the bodies when found, saying they had been clearly dead for several hours. What's really disturbing about this is, if I remember correctly, the coroner put the time of death somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, around 3 a.m., which means for at least 2 hours and 45 minutes he was walking around this house with his wife and kids dead in their bed. Only the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsies, Dr. Raj Nandira, declined to give an estimated time of death, but then said she thought it could have been from 3 to 5 a.m. And Chris had left home around 5:43 a.m. Another pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who had investigated the murders of John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King, testified that they had to have died before 5:43 a.m. because of the lividity and rigor mortis to the bodies. Through video testimony, which I'll play here in a second, Joyce Meyer confirmed that if she found out Chris was in an adulterous affair while still married, his job would have been in trouble.
Do you think you have worldwide?
About 900.
And we'll get right to the point. Do you know the defendant in this case, Christopher Coleman?
Yes, I do.
How long have you known him?
Since he was a little boy.
And how was that?
His parents came to some conferences that I did over in Illinois. I did a weekly meeting over there, and his mother came to it, brought him with him.
Now, at some point, did he become an employee of Joyce Meyer's ministry?
Yes, he did.
And about when was that?
Probably about 1998.
Okay. So, and through 2009, he was with you about 11 years, is that
Yes,
correct?
yeah.
What kind of employee was he? What was his responsibilities there?
He was in the security department.
Was he in general security? Did he move up through the ranks? What happened with that?
If I remember correctly, he started in general security and then he became the supervisor of that department. And then when a personal security person that I had left our employ, we offered Chris that job and he took it.
And what did that job entail then? Did he travel with you?
He traveled with us when we did conferences, when we did speaking engagements, and when we went out of the country and did crusades in other countries.
How often, I mean, was it monthly that you would take one of these longer trips?
Well, out of the country, we would only go 2 to 3 times a year. And then we did 13 conferences here in the U.S. And there may have been some years where we did even more than that because we cut down some as time went by. And then I would do several speaking engagements a year.
Okay, so a different trip where you just go there and back?
Yes.
As opposed to a conference where you might stay for a few days?
Yeah, when we did our conferences, we'd be gone Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If I did a speaking engagement, I would normally just go and come back the same day.
And by the end of his employment, he was traveling with you to all these conferences?
Yes.
What did he do during the conferences?
Just made sure that everything was safe for me in the crowds, you know, when people wanted to talk to me, that it was okay, you know, that was somebody that was okay. We have pretty large crowds, and so it was mainly just for our safety and to make sure that everything went right.
At the end of his employment, do you know how much he was making?
$100,000.
Did he have a company laptop computer?
Yes.
Did he carry it with him?
Yes.
Is this something that you saw with him when you made these trips, for example?
Yes.
He seemed to always have it with him?
Yeah, he carried his computer.
Okay. Did you ever see anybody else use that computer other than the defendant?
No.
Okay, May 6th, 2009, this is the day after Sherry and her sons were murdered. Did you speak to the police that day?
Yes.
When you talked to the police on that day, the day after this incident, were you aware whether or not this defendant was having an affair?
I wasn't in the beginning of the interview, but I was informed toward the end of the interview that he had confessed to having an affair.
But as you came into it that day, you didn't know?
I did not know.
Were you aware of whether or not he was having marital problems, though, between him and Sherry?
I did know that he and Sherry were having some marital problems.
How did you know that?
Well, she had called our office and talked to...
I'm gonna object as it calls for hearsay unless she spoke directly with this witness.
Okay. Did you speak with Sherry Coleman?
No.
Okay. How were you aware that they were having marital problems?
She talked to my son, Daniel.
And did he relate that to you?
He told me so I could talk to Chris about it.
And did you in fact talk to the defendant about the situation?
I did.
And just generally, what was that conversation?
He said that, you know, that they were having issues, that Sherry had told Daniel that...
I'm going to object.
Okay.
Sherry Coleman told anybody.
Okay. Well, my son Daniel told me. Okay.
My son Daniel told her regarding the situation as well.
Although what the defendant told you, you could tell us. What was your conversation with the defendant about the problem?
What he told me is that he felt that Sherry was very controlling, that no matter what he did, she wasn't happy, and that they just in general, you know, were not getting along, and that he was just really tired of it. And at that point I asked him if, you know, they'd be willing to get some marriage counseling from a pastor that we have at our office, and right away he said yes, they were willing to do that, which they did do.
Do you know about when that was that he talked to you about that?
It was in the fall 2008.
Okay. All right. Did you ever become aware of any threats that this defendant said he had received against himself or his family?
Yes, he told me about some.
The defendant personally told you that?
Yes.
What did he tell you? What threats did he report?
He told me that he had gotten an email threatening his family if he did not stop working for me. And then he told me that somebody started putting these threats in his mailbox, at which point I think he became more concerned about them, since that meant somebody knew where he lived. He told me that they had taken the information to the police, in Belleville, and that he also had a detective that lived across the street from him, and that they were going to make arrangements to put a camera there on his mailbox to see if they could see who was actually doing it.
And you said Belleville. He actually lived in Columbia, is that
Okay,
right?
well, Columbia, yeah.
That's
I'm
what I thought
sorry.
you meant. When do you think that was, when you became aware of the threats from him?
I think it was probably sometime late March or in April.
Of 2009, then?
Yeah.
This is spring, okay. To your knowledge, had any other employees ever been singled out in that way?
No.
Did you have other employees that provided security, as this defendant did?
One other one, yes.
And there wasn't any threats or anything to that person?
No.
Okay, this was all from a conversation you had with police on May the 6th, but on May the 12th, did you again ask to talk to the police?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
About a month prior to the beginning of May, say during the month of April, I just felt like he wasn't, I was just noticing that he wasn't as attentive to his duties. He was forgetting things that were just not normally him, and just in general not quite as engaged. I noticed a personal cell phone in his car one day that was being charged up, and I asked him about that because I'd never seen him with it, because he had a ministry phone. That was what he carried all the time. And he just said it was a personal cell phone, and I started asking other questions, and then I just thought, you know, it's really none of my business if he has a personal cell phone, so I let that go. And
Did he, during that period of time, ever call in sick for work?
on May the 4th, he called and told me that he wasn't feeling good and asked if he could take the day off.
May the 4th, 2009.
Right.
Was that unusual for the defendant?
Yes, he was. I mean, he worked for us 11 years, so I can't swear that he never took a day off, but I didn't remember him ever calling me and saying that he didn't feel good and wanted to take off. He was just always there.
And how were you informed on May the 4th, 2009 that he wasn't coming to work that day?
He called me in the morning and asked me if he could take the day off.
Is there anything else? Did the defendant go on a trip with you during that period of time to the state of Florida?
Yes.
Was there anything about that trip, again, something you observed directly of the defendant, that caused you now to be suspicious?
Well, he stayed there. He said he wanted to stay down there for a few days after our trip was over, after the working part of our trip was over. He said he was going to visit these friends, a girlfriend of Sherry's, after I found out that that was the girl that he'd been having the affair with. Made me kind of suspicious then as to why he stayed there.
And that was sometime during this period of time, late 2008, early 2009?
Yes, I think it was in 2009.
Okay. And was that unusual for him to stay after when you'd gone on that trip?
Yeah, and especially he was by himself, so.
Okay. And again, in retrospect, that made you wonder?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I have to ask you, if the defendant were having an affair, if you had known that at the time, and I understand you've testified that you didn't, what effect would that have had on his employment?
If he would have been having an adulterous affair while he was still married, then it could have definitely affected his job.
Okay. Were there persons over the years that were terminated in situations like that?
We had situations where they were, yes.
And in fact, he was married during the period of time that he worked for you, married to Sherry Coleman, correct?
Yes.
Were there other persons who had adulterous affairs while married whose employment was terminated at Joyce Meyer Ministry?
Yes.
For that reason?
Yes.
Okay. Now I have to ask you about the distinction here. What if it was a divorce as opposed to an adulterous affair?
Each situation is handled totally separately based on the circumstances. We have many people that work for us that have been divorced, and a person is not necessarily, do they lose their job because they get a divorce. It wouldn't have been the divorce so much as the immorality.
So for instance, if a person in your employment, if their spouse filed for divorce against them, and perhaps they had little control over that, you might leave them in your employment? That's a possibility?
Certainly.
Okay, and on the other end of the spectrum, if a person was having an adulterous affair and then filed for divorce from their spouse to be with that person, then their employment may have been terminated.
May have been, yes.
Okay. Do you think there was any situations of that in the past where someone was actually terminated under those kind of circumstances?
I believe so.
Okay, at some point you did learn that the defendant was having an affair, is that correct?
Yes.
Was that from the police, or how did you actually find that out?
Well, the police initially said that he had confessed to the affair.
What effect did that have on his employment? And I don't know what happened at the end of his employment.
Before you answer,
Once you were aware that he was having an affair, and obviously he's no longer employed with you, what happened to his employment?
He resigned.
Okay. Did he discuss that with you?
No, that was handled through our COO.
Okay. Did you fire him? Did
I
you
didn't
terminate his
know.
employment? Okay. So once that situation became common knowledge, the defendant resigned employment with Joyce Meyer Ministry.
He asked to resign, yes.
Okay. And you accepted his resignation?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Ms. Meyer, Mr. Coleman was an excellent employee during his 11 years at Joyce Meyer Ministry, isn't that
Yes, he
correct?
was.
And he started the security department from the ground up pretty much?
I believe so.
And you had no complaints of him as an employee at Joyce Meyer Ministry?
Nope.
And the things that you testified to about your suspicions only became your suspicions after Mr. Coleman was arrested and charged with these offenses, is that correct?
Yes.
Only after looking back, correct?
Yes.
They were not suspicious or unusual at the time of these events?
No, there were things that I felt were a little bit unusual, but because he'd worked for us so long and I had no reason to think otherwise, I just like, I didn't know. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you testified about some marital problems between Chris and Sherry Coleman, and you became aware of those problems. And your understanding of those problems is that they were just normal type communication problems or marital problems that would be typical in marriages, is that correct?
Yeah.
And you spoke with Mr. Coleman about that and directed him or suggested that he get counseling with Mike Shepard.
I asked him if they would get counseling with Mike, and he said yes.
Immediately said yes, is that right?
Yes.
And he followed through with that counseling?
Yes.
Mr. Shepard, what's his position at, is he employed by Joyce Meyer Ministry?
He's in our employment.
Is he a pastor or?
He's a pastor. He functions as like a chaplain for our ministry and does a lot of work within the departments, a lot of leadership teaching, just a lot of different things like that. He helps oversee our church in the inner city.
Is he a licensed counselor or marriage counselor?
He's a licensed pastor.
Okay. Is that, well, I don't think that answers my question though. I mean, is he a licensed counselor or marriage counselor?
No.
Is that one of his normal parts of his job, is to engage in marriage counseling or other types of counseling?
Yes.
And you sent Mr. Coleman to counseling because you believe that could benefit him in his marriage with Sherry Coleman, is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, based on your observations, after they had gone to several counseling sessions, things had seemed to have gotten better between Chris and Sherry Coleman, is that correct?
It wasn't anything I observed, it was what I was told. He told me they were doing better, and the counselor, Mike Shepard, indicated that he felt they were doing better.
So was Mr. Shepard supposed to report back to you on how the counseling was progressing?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he did report back to you
Yes.
that things were going pretty well, is that
Yes.
right? And I think you testified before that, or earlier, that Sherry Coleman never contacted you directly
No, she
about
did
these
not.
marital problems, is that correct?
Yes.
Did he ever express any concerns to you about spending more time with his wife or his family or taking more time off?
No.
What was your general attitude, would you say, as far as Mr. Coleman being able to take time off and spend with his family? I mean, obviously he had a pretty hectic travel schedule based on what you testified to earlier.
He did, but he also got sufficient comp time, and he was allowed to make his own schedule. I even encouraged him to take more time off than what he did, and suggested to him that he spend more time with with Sherry during the weekdays when he was home.
Are you aware of an instance in, I believe in May of 2008, when Mr. Coleman requested time off for August of that year to spend time with his family and celebrate his 10th wedding anniversary with Sherry Coleman, and he was turned down?
Yes.
And there was a out of overseas trip, I guess, scheduled in August.
An overseas trip, which were very important for us, and probably, as far as needing security, some of the most important ones.
Okay.
And so.
And Mr. Coleman requested to miss that trip and have one of the other security people go instead of him. Is that correct?
I don't think there was another security person that could have went instead of him. He was pretty much it as far as that level of security, but we asked him if he could take the weekend before, the weekend after.
Okay, but he specifically requested to miss the trip, and the minute, or I don't know who, but somebody.
He did not request it of me. He talked to me about it, told me that it was very important to Sherry, and if I recall, the request was put in pretty late.
Okay, but he was denied. He was denied that time off, right?
Not from me.
Okay,
but
from the ministry, whoever.
Yeah, I guess.
Right.
If you say he was, then
right.
He was.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't handle those things, so I don't really know.
Now you testified that divorce is not an automatic grounds for dismissal from employment at Joyce Meyer Ministry.
That's correct.
And in fact, I think you also testified that several people who have worked at the ministry have been divorced.
Yes.
And did not lose their employment.
Right.
The defense poked as much holes as they could in the theories and insisted that Chris was innocent. After a trial that lasted a little over a month, the deliberation started. The jury was at first fairly divided, but one little detail turned the tide. Although the defense had successfully blocked some explicit images of Chris with Tara, the thumbnails were still in the list of evidence provided to jurors. With a magnifying glass they requested from the court, they noticed that the date stamp in some of the pictures was October of 2008, meaning that both Chris and Tara had lied about when their relationship started. This ruined them all and destroyed their defense.
Just walked out of the courtroom. Very emotional moment when the foreperson read the verdict, guilty on all 3 counts. First-degree murder of Sherry Coleman, first-degree murder of Garrett, and first-degree murder of Gavin Coleman. It was almost like a church service walking in. Everybody was very quiet, somber. We saw hands clasped. It was almost like the nervous awaiting whether the bride is going to show up. Then when John O'Gara, the defense attorney, came out and looked at the Coleman family, he kind of shook like this, as if to say, we tried our hardest. That kind of gave it away. Then a prosecuting attorney came out, walked up to Sherry Coleman's side of the family, and seemed to indicate that you're here, you're finally here. And then there were these little moments, Sherry Coleman's friends in the back, crying. And then when the jury came in, they were very lighthearted. You could almost tell that they'd had some good, solid discussions, but they felt good to where they came. And then they read that verdict, and there was not much of a display of emotion because the judge warned, hey, we're going to cart you off to jail if you show displays of emotion. So the strongest display I saw was somebody next to me, Sherry Coleman's side of the family, clenched her water bottle hard so that I could hear it crinkle. Other than that, there wasn't any outward displays, there were no celebrations, nobody slamming their fists down. I looked over at Christopher Coleman. He was almost hyperventilating, but slower breaths. He was breathing out of his mouth very slowly, very red-faced, as if he was trying as hard as he could to hold back those tears. Back to you.
A judge sentenced convicted murderer Chris Hayes to life in prison without possibility of parole today, instead of sentencing him to death.
The penalty phase of Coleman's trial was expected to take days. But it took just hours instead after Coleman waived his right for the jury to decide his fate. Fox 2's Chris Hayes is the only TV reporter to cover every second of the Coleman trial.
He was in Waterloo today. Here's his report.
Prosecutor Chris Reitz did not say much when asking for Chris Coleman's execution. Reitz did say Coleman felt them die, Your Honor. He's capable of strangling innocent children. Then defense attorney John O'Gara Jr. responded with a long monologue about our values as a society and how life in prison could be worse than death, saying, quote, he will die in prison. His cell is a 6 by 11-foot coffin that he'll share with another man 23 hours a day, subjected to his cruelties. O'Gara said this about his closing statement.
I probably waited 24 years to give that type of a closing argument, really, regarding the death penalty. I hope that we don't have it again in Illinois. Neither result would surprise me. If it got stayed away, I hope that it stays away.
Judge Milton Wharton said a decision to execute would be symbolic without leading to any closure. He gave Coleman life in prison without parole, calling the loss of freedom the most potent retribution. Columbia Police Chief Joseph Edwards believed if there's a case for execution, Chris Coleman was it, but he agreed it would not bring closure.
For anybody involved or associated with this case, closure does not happen when a 9-year-old, an 11-year-old, and their mother are murdered while they're in their bed, in their home, in the city of Columbia or anywhere else in any city, in any country.
Coleman's family had no comment as they walked calmly out of court. They walked together and parted with the words, I love you. Coleman could be moved from the Monroe County Jail as early as tomorrow. He can't go to Menard because his brother is a corrections officer there. He could be headed to Statesville Prison in Joliet. Live in Waterloo, Chris Hayes, Fox 2 News.
After 15 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty. The penalty phase was expected to last weeks, but only lasted a few hours after Chris waived his right to have the jury decide his sentence. He got 3 consecutive life sentences. After having his appeals rejected in April of 2018, Chris Coleman filed a petition for post-conviction relief, which addresses violations of a defendant's constitutional rights. He cited ineffective assistance of counsel and denial of due process, and said that the jury should not have had access to the pictures since they weren't allowed in evidence in March 2019. A judge granted Coleman the chance for a new evidentiary hearing, but there hasn't been any decisions made on whether he'll get a new trial or not. As far as the thumbnails that the jury looked at, I do agree with that. They were not admitted into evidence, therefore the jury should have never seen them. How they ended up in the jury room, I couldn't tell you. Guys, please let me know what you think about this case and leave your comments below. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to follow me on social media, all of the links are below. And if you're interested, I have set up a Patreon page. The link to that is below. I will be putting an extended version of this video up on the Patreon page as well. And thank you again for watching and for your support. And I'll see you in the next video.